The New York Times has an awesome story about lobbying power in Washington, D.C. centered around a company called Amgen. They're a pharmaceutical company. They make drugs. And they happen to get this thing called Section 632 inserted into the fiscal cliff deal. How much did that wind up costing the American taxpayer? I'll tell you in just a little bit. But first of all, let me give you some background on Amgen. Well, they have 74 lobbyists in Washington. That's basically a small army of lobbyists. Just for one company, 74 lobbyists. Gee, I wonder if they're trying to get something out of the government. And since 2007, they have spent $5 million lobbying our congressmen and senators. And by the way, our presidents as well. I wonder if they want anything in return for that $5 million. Well, they've gotten plenty in return. As an example, in 2010, the government spent $1.9 billion on injectable anti-anemia drugs. Well, will you look at that? That's exactly what Amgen makes. A wonderful coincidence. Now, if you just left it at that, you might say, hey, Amgen makes a drug that people need, and the government happened to buy it through Medicare, etc., and it's understandable. But here's something that's interesting. Because of the way that the rules were set up and the incentive was set up, Amgen would make more money if patients were prescribed this 2 different times in 2 different sessions by the doctors. And in 2008, finally, the government stepped in and said, God, this has cost us so much money and cost the taxpayers and the clients, the people actually getting the treatment, so much money. And by the way, it hurts them because they get a higher dosage and it actually is counterproductive. It hurts their health, okay? So they finally fixed it in 2008 and they said, you're going to get it in 1 session. Okay? Now, it's just a simple thing about one particular treatment that they're doing. You know what happened? Use of the dialysis drugs dropped by nearly 25%. Now, that goes to show you people didn't need these drugs at the rate that they were getting them. The government had helped Amgen set up rules so doctors would make more money if they overprescribed. Now, that hurt the patients. And you can tell because the minute they removed that incentive, all of a sudden the doctors started prescribing it a lot less. And it was actually to our great health and wealth benefits, right? So a small example. Now, Amgen was not deterred by the fact that the government had been helping them. They decided to screw the government anyway. And they just recently settled a suit, and it's not just a civil suit, it's also a criminal suit for illegal marketing of one of their drugs. How much do they have to pay? Well, a record fine, a $762 million fine in criminal and civil penalties. Now, did anybody go to jail? Of course not. Corporations and executives are above the law. It's a criminal violation. It's a record-breaking illegality. No. You just pay a fine. But look, they did pay $762 million. Don't worry, they're about to make it back. So how are they going to do that? Well, they're going to sneak something into one of our bills. Now, that's Section 632 in the fiscal cliff deal, as I was telling you. Now, who are the people who champion that clause? Well, 4 people in particular, 3 in the Senate. One was Max Baucus, he's a Democrat. And then you had Orrin Hatch, who's a Republican from Utah. And then you had Mitch McConnell, and then, of course, President Obama. Wait a minute, look at these numbers. It turns out Amgen gave $67,750 to Max Baucus, $59,000 to Hatch, $73,000 to McConnell, and over $141,000 to President Obama's campaign. What a wonderful coincidence. And those are the 4 guys that wound up getting Amgen this enormous break. Again, I'm about to give you the size of that in a second, and it's going to blow you away. All right. They're not done yet, though. Just giving money to the politicians is not enough. They're going to have to give more. So what do? They also contribute to their PACs. First, we've got Glacier PAC. Oh, who's that run by? Oh, right. Well, you look at that. It's run by Max Baucus from Montana. Who would have guessed? And then they gave to Orrin PAC. Well, you're not going to be surprised to find out that's Orrin Hatch's PAC. Yes, one of the 3 senators we were mentioning. And you know what else they gave to? Freedom Path. Well, what's Freedom Path? Well, that happened to be a so-called independent group that just happened to run a tremendous amount of ads in favor of Orrin Hatch during his primaries and was funded by the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America, a trade group that includes Amgen. Well, the coincidences keep on rolling in. And then here's my favorite. they also gave hundreds of thousands of dollars to Utah Families Foundation. What is that? That's Orrin Hatch's charitable foundation that burnishes his image back in Utah. He has to go around saying, I am a man of great charity. Look at this, I did the Utah Families Foundation. Amgen, part of my bribe goes to that foundation, okay? All right, good job. By the way, don't get me wrong, it's not all Republicans. I told Max Baucus is a Democrat, President Obama is a Democrat, right? And they also, Amgen, just to cover their bases, give a decent amount of money to the Congressional Black Caucus as well. Everybody gets paid, except of us, of course, but they're not done yet. Here's how the rest of the corruption works. Who are the top lobbyists for Amgen? This is awesome. Jeff Forbes, who is the former chief of staff for Max Baucus. And Hunter Bates, who's the former chief of staff for Mitch McConnell. And by the way, Tony Podesta, who is probably the most influential lobbyist for President Obama's administration. He goes to lobby them and is very powerful. And by the way, if that doesn't do it, Amgen's lobbyists visited the White House over a dozen times, and you see it in the White House visitors log. They are very welcome. Every once in a while, the president will meet with liberal groups and they'll make a big deal out of it, like, look at me, am I not merciful? I met with some liberals. Meanwhile, he's meeting with Amgen over 12 times, or his administration is. All right, we're not done yet. One final piece of the puzzle in terms of how they wind up circling all of our legislators and legally bribing them in every imaginable way. So who's the guy who wrote the law? Well, the biggest health and Medicare policy analyst they had working on this fiscal cliff deal and this specific provision was Dan Todd. And where did Dan Todd work before? Well, will you look at that? He worked as a health and policy analyst for Amgen's Government Affairs Office from 2005 to 2009. But don't worry, they assure us that Dan Todd is perfectly neutral and would never consider all of the money he got from that same group earlier in his career. So what do they get in return? Well, first, before I get to Section 632, I want to tell you that the Government Accountability Office has found that Medicare had overpaid for dialysis by up to $880 million in 2011 alone. Another wonderful coincidence that happens to give a tremendous amount of money back to Amgen. And remember, their fine was $762 million. But that wasn't enough. So in this fiscal cliff deal, where we were supposed to help fix the deficit, we added to the deficit by $500 million for this one loophole that helps Amgen and their profits. $500 million out of the pockets of the taxpayers and over to Amgen. They don't say Amgen. What they do say is the drug that Amgen produces, and that drug winds up getting a huge deal. Now, why? We're overpaying. All these years we're overpaying. And we're supposed to finally fix it. And the fix was supposed to come back in 2012, but Amgen sent their army of lobbyists over, and they got a 2-year extension to make sure we did not fix the problem, so that we continued to overpay. So what do they do now? Well, it's going to run out in 2014. They got another 2-year extension. And when you ask Orrin Hatch's office and Max Baucus' office, they say, well, you know, these rules are really complicated. We need more time to make sure we're getting them right. Until 2014 wasn't enough time? Or could it be that the longer you wait, the more money Amgen makes and the more money comes out of our pockets? This is how they do legalized corruption in the United States of America. It is systematic, it is systemic. They go and they buy these congressmen, these senators, and by the way, the presidents as well. And then they get exactly what they want. But when Max Baucus' office was asked about it, they said, quote, what is the best policy for Montanans and people across the country lies at the heart of every decision Chairman Baucus makes. It's as simple as that. Now, what do you think? Do you think it's as simple as that? Or that perhaps all that money and all the people who work for Max Baucus and all the people who work for Max Baucus now that later will work for these companies and all the money that they funnel to the PACs and to the so-called nonprofits, you think that might have something to do with it? No, I'm sure these are honorable gentlemen who only care about their voters. Gee, I wonder why Congress has record low approval ratings. Can't quite figure it out.